So hello dear students, welcome back to Bajirao IAS Academy UPSC Mains 2024 General Studies Paper 4 Analysis. So in this particular session we have some questions to discuss, and we will try to discuss all these questions in a very detailed and a very comprehensive manner, and we will also try to structure all these questions, because in ethics generally what happens is that it is very difficult to structure these questions. So we will understand how we can structure these questions and how we can address the demand of the question, the core demand of the question, and how to write introduction and conclusion in these answers in a very detailed manner. The question with which that we are going to start this session is about the mindless addiction to form, ignoring the substance of the matter, results in rendering injustice. And in fact there are a lot of questions in ethics paper which are generally based on justice and injustice are being asked. So a perceptive civil servant is one who ignores such literalness and carries out true intent. Now examine above statement with suitable illustrations. Now when the question is said that you need to explain this with suitable illustrations, you need to write some examples. So you need to explain this with some relevant examples in the answer. So therefore you can give a comprehensive and a detailed expression of this particular question. Now what does this quote actually mean? Now this quote actually means that when we talk about civil servants, so civil servants have certain rules and regulations. So there's a code of conduct for the civil servants, and they must follow the rule of law, rules, and also the laws and the constitution as well. But just literally following the laws, right? So whatever law says, the civil servant must follow the law, rather than not understanding the true intent of the law, so is something which may lead to injustice, right? So I would like to give one example to explain this quote. Now imagine that there is a remote rural village somewhere in Chhattisgarh, the state of Chhattisgarh, right? So you are a district collector in one of the district in that particular state, and you are a district collector, and you have to look into the implementation of public distribution system, right? So distribution of food grains through the fair price shops. Suppose generally what happened was so in order to make sure that everyone gets a fair share of food grains, or in order to weed out the ghost beneficiaries, so in order to minimize the exclusion errors or the fake beneficiaries in the public distribution system, so the government started implementing the biometric, right? So a biometric system, the government started implementing biometric system in the public distribution system, right? So whoever have these biometrics, so biometric essentially link one's Aadhaar card with the available data, and then the food grains would be distributed to the beneficiary. But imagine that there was a family which is below poverty line family, but they don't have the Aadhaar card with them. So since they don't have Aadhaar card, biometric is not possible, and they were denied food grains, right? So they denied food grain. So since they've denied food grain, so law or rules and regulations clearly says that whoever have the biometric, only they can be given the food grains under public distribution system. But on the other hand, there is also another family X, which is a family which is below poverty line family, and even though they are true beneficiaries, they lack the Aadhaar, and the biometric linkage is not possible for them, right? So because a law says that only those people who have the biometric, they can be given food grains, but this family don't have the biometric, they would be denied food grains, but they are also real beneficiaries, right? So this question clearly says that the civil servants must not go strictly as per the laws, rules and regulations. Rather, the civil servants should also be able to understand the true intent of these laws, rules, regulations and constitution. They should be empathetic, sympathetic. They should be concerned towards people who are marginalized, who are deprived, underprivileged sections, right? So because if the civil servant don't approve providing food grains to this family, so this will leads to gross injustice, right? Don't you think that this will leads to a gross injustice to the family? So that's what the question has been saying, right? A mindless addiction to form and ignoring the substance of the matter. So what is the substance of public distribution system? Providing food grains to the below poverty line people and also reducing the problem or the challenge of hunger, right? So civil servants should not ignore the substance of the matter, because it would lead to it would result in injustice, right? So this is how it will lead to the injustice. So therefore civil servants should not neglect the substance of the actual thing. So in this context, so what is the approach of the question? So I hope you have understood the essence of this question. So what should be the approach of this question? First, you need to briefly explain the essence of the statement in the introduction itself. In the second part of the answer, mention some problems of mindless adherence to form, and then discuss perceptive civil servants' approach to true intent, and conclude the answer by mentioning some appropriate way forward. So that's how you have to structure this answer, right? So civil servants are part of the public administration. So in public administration, where civil servants are part of, focusing solely on the formality, the objective nature of implementing rules, implementing laws or specific schemes, programs, but you are ignoring the substance of the matter. So when the government frames certain rules, certain laws, or bringing in new policies, new frameworks or new programs, the government actually focuses on certain objectives. That is the substance of this particular aspect. Now here the substance is the welfare, or welfare is the substance. So if any civil servant in the public administration ignores substance, that would lead to gross injustice. Now in this context, the civil servants must prioritizes or must focus on the spirit as well as the intent behind laws. What is the actual intent behind the laws? For example, if I can talk about the fundamental rights, what is the actual intent behind these fundamental rights? So protecting the civil liberties, of citizens is the actual objective behind the fundamental rights. And what about the directive principles of state policy? So directive principles of state policy, the key objective is to ensure India as a welfare state, or make India as a welfare state but not a police state. That is the intent or the spirit or the objective behind these fundamental rights are directive principles of state policy, right? So there are a lot of such laws, right? For example, manual scavenging Prevention and Regulation Act was passed by the Indian Parliament in the year 2013. So the objective of that law is to ensure social justice, prevent discrimination. So that is actual intent and the spirit of the law. So ultimately civil servants need to prioritize the actual spirit and intent behind those laws over the rigid procedural compliance, right? So civil servants should always try to ensure fairness as well as justice when they are fulfilling their administrative responsibilities, when they are implementing government schemes, government policies and programs. So that's what this question has been saying, and you should briefly explain this essence of the quote in the introduction. Now, in the second part of the answer, you just mention what are the problems of mindless adherence to the form, right? So, or mindless adherence to rigid procedural compliance, lack of fairness and justice. So you need to mention some problems. If necessary, you just mention them very briefly, but second part of the answer you need to address in a more detailed manner, right? So generally what happens is that, so when someone blindly adhere to the rules and regulations, so it could lead to denying access to benefits for those who are lacking resources or proper documentation. Now I have already told you one example of the public distribution system and distribution of food grains to the individuals who are homeless, individuals who don't have proper documentation, but still they are people who are below poverty line people. They are migrant laborers, they are vulnerable and marginalized sections, but a civil servant cannot deny food grains to such people with on the basis that they don't have any proper documentation, because it is very important that we need to alleviate poverty. We should also reduce or prevent hunger and malnutrition as well. So therefore, a civil servant denying ration cards to homeless individuals without a permanent address would also comes part of a blind adherence to rules, neglecting the actual intent or the spirit of the laws or policies and certain programs. And in fact, we very often see red tapeism is a very challenging issue in the Indian civil services, right? So red tapeism, bureaucratic inefficiency, bureaucratic delays, so they very often lead to the overall inefficiency as well as a slow public service delivery, right? So slow public service delivery and inefficiency into the system, so would lead to the loss of trust among the citizens. Okay, so it would lead to loss of trust among citizens, because trust and confidence of citizens among the governance as well as the administrators is very, very important. But bureaucratic delays would further leads to inefficiency and even slow public service delivery as well. So one such example is in 2014 there were Kashmir floods, right? So due to those Kashmir floods, there was a huge delay in the distribution of relief material due to incomplete paperwork. So we need to understand the actual intent or the spirit. Now when we are not able to provide the relief work, or when we are not able to do the relief work, or not able to deliver the relief material on time, so people people at risk would further increase, right? So that would also impact the overall trust and confidence of the people over the administration. Okay, so over a period of time, people also may lose faith in the system. They no longer have faith over the governance, over the administrative system, because rules are very rigid, rules are very strict, so that would also result in unfair outcomes. And in fact, corruption is also a key concern, because a complex processes further encourage taking bribes as shortcuts and even exploiting the vulnerable sections as well. Okay, so these are some of the problems with mindless adherence to the form, mindless adherence to the existing laws and regulations and rules. And in fact, mindless adherence to this particular laws, rules would also stifle innovation as well, because it may lead to halting a creative educational methods due to a rigid compliance with the outdated curricula. Even if civil servants have some innovative ways to address different problems which are prevalent, which are existing in the society, for example, arresting child marriages, preventing sexual harassment of women at workplaces, preventing domestic violence, and addressing the problem of illiteracy, increasing enrollment ratio in schools. So even though civil servants have a lot of solutions to address these problems, but whenever rules mandated that a civil servant must comply with these complex procedures, then of course it would lead to stifling innovation among these civil servants. So therefore these are all the problems that exist when civil servants blindly adhere to the rules and the existing procedures. And apart from that, so when any civil servants strictly adhere to these rules, so it would also leads to undermining the public welfare programs, because so public welfare programs may be inefficient if focus remains formalities rather than outcomes. So one example would be it's not just about the public distribution system, so it should also be about any welfare program that the government introduces, right? So it would certainly undermine the public welfare programs, and in fact it would also leads to moral disengagement as well, because so one such example would be deporting refugees due to missing paperwork, ignoring the ethical responsibility of offering asylum in life-threatening situations, right? So all these are the problems or the challenges with respect to this particular issue of blindly adhering to the procedures, laws and rules without actually giving or giving importance or prioritizing the actual intent and spirit of a particular aspect. Next, the perceptive civil servants approach to true intent. Now, how civil servants can actually have develop this true intent, and how it actually results in it actually gives a good results. So firstly, a focus should be on achieving the intended result of the law rather than getting bogged down by the rigid rules or rigid or complex procedures. For example, Aruna Sundar Rajan, so she was an IAS, a telecom secretary, rolled out BharatNet to connect the rural areas. Okay, so don't get bogged down by the rigid rules or complex procedures which are existed, which are enshrined or mentioned, but rather than you need to understand what is the spirit and what is the actual intent and objective of one such program or policy or any such scheme. And in fact, for any civil servant, empathy, compassion and sympathy are core values and very important values, because empathy and compassion helps civil servants understand the true intent of different laws, rules and regulations. For example, Prashant Nair was an IAS officer and he launched several citizen-centric initiatives such as Compassionate Kozhikode for compassion-driven governance in the state of Kerala. And in fact, whenever any civil servant who understood the intent of any such scheme, program, so they can adjust deadlines and they can also ensure that they can fulfill their duties or their work on time, so that would result in larger public welfare. For example, Smita Sabharwal, an IAS officer, also launched Amma Lalana program in Telangana, integrating public feedback into the governance. And apart from that, a proactive problem solving, so that is pragmatism. So pragmatism encourages practical solutions over a strict theoretical applications. So however, what is required to ensure that the perceptive civil servants approach true intent, right? So they work with the true intent. So firstly, compassion, empathy, compassion, empathy among civil servants is very, very important. Apart from that, civil servants should develop the value of emotional intelligence. So this is also very, very important, emotional intelligence. So there should be code of ethics for the civil servants. Code of ethics should be enshrined, and also make sure that regular evaluation of civil servants and the work that they have done, and also announcing rewards or incentives for the civil servants who work with the intent along with complying with rules and regulations, not strictly following rules or complex procedures. So all these things are very, very important to ensure that civil servants understood the actual spirit and intent of different welfare programs rather than the complex or rigid rules and procedures which are existed, right? So that makes civil servants or civil services more responsive, that makes it more transparent, and makes civil servants more and more accountable. And with that, we can also achieve the goal and objective of minimum government. So minimum government and maximum governance. So that is the motto that the Prime Minister was given for ensuring or achieving efficiency within the administration or in the governance. So that is in line with the citizen-centric administration. So the next question is about the code of conduct and code of ethics. So both code of conduct and code of ethics are the sources of guidance in public administration, right? So we'll understand what are these code of conduct and code of ethics and how they are the sources of guidance in public administration. And there is a code of conduct already in operation, whereas code of ethics is yet to put in place. And in this context, suggest a suitable model for code of ethics to maintain integrity, probity, and transparency in governance. So this is very simple and easy question, and I hope you have understood the essence of this particular question. And in this table, you can see the difference between code of ethics and code of conduct, right? So when we talk about code of ethics is very often universal, right? So code of ethics consists of certain moral values. Because of those moral values, it is universal in nature. It is consisting of broad principles and it is universal in nature. But on the other hand, if you look at the code of conduct, so code of conduct specific behaviors, so it consists of specific behaviors, so it is having detailed rules, but it is a role specific. Code of conduct is role specific. So code of conduct is a strict with penalties if anyone violates, if anyone breaches this code of conduct. But on the other hand, code of ethics is a guiding principles, a set of moral values. It is less stricter in nature. However, code of conduct is adaptable to new standards. So remember, this table is also very, very important, because there's always a chance that differentiate between code of conduct and code of ethics. There may be such questions being asked by UPSC in the examination. So code of conduct and code of ethics are the sources of guidance in the public administration. Don't you think that? So there's a code of conduct, and code of conduct outlines specific behavior for the civil servants in the administration. So in such a thing, such a aspect, so don't you think that it is a source of guidance in the public administration? And apart from that, code of ethics also consists of certain moral values. So certain moral values in the sense that, so civil servants should develop the value of probity, honesty, integrity. They should be compassionate, they should be empathetic, and all those values, they should develop emotional intelligence. So all those values are part of the code of ethics, right? So because of that reason, both code of conduct and code of ethics are sources of guidance in the public administration. Now if you look at Indian civil services, for Indian civil services, we already have the all India civil services conduct rules. We have the code of conduct, but as of now, for civil services, for the Indian administration, there is no code of ethics. Okay, so whereas a code of ethics is not yet put in place. Now in this backdrop, suggest a suitable model for code of ethics. Now you need to mention how code of ethics is important for Indian civil services to maintain integrity, probity and transparency in the governance. So even though we already have the code of conduct into the Indian administration for Indian civil services. And what should be the approach of this question? So the approach of this question is also very easy. You just briefly define both code of conduct as well as code of ethics in the introduction. So after that, you need to discuss the proposed code of conduct and how it should be actually, and then you need to mention you need to discuss a suggested framework for code of ethics and ultimately conclude the answer by stressing on the importance of both of code of conduct as well as code of ethics as well, right? Now in fact, if you look at the Indian administration, the overall governance in India, the public administration actually depends on two key ethical frameworks. Now what are those two key ethical frameworks on which the Indian administrative system is dependent upon? So the first ethical framework is code of conduct and second ethical framework is code of ethics. Code of conduct and code of ethics. So remember that we already have this code of conduct for Indian civil services or Indian administration, but we do not have the code of ethics into the public administration, right? So while the former is operational in India, and in fact it also provides a specific behavioral guidelines for the civil servants, but the later is yet to be implemented or it is not yet implemented. So therefore, in this backdrop, a well-designed code of ethics is crucial. It is very important to ensure integrity, probity, transparency in the governance. So remember, honesty, integrity, probity, transparency and accountability into the administration is very important. Now why it is very important? So it is important to prevent or to arrest corruption in Indian civil services or Indian public administration, to ensure efficiency into the administration and ensure that responsive governance would be more responsive. So it is very important to arrest corruption, to free Indian administration from corruption, to ensure efficiency, to ensure that governance is more and more responsive, and also public administration becomes more and more compassionate as well as empathetic to the public cause. So all these things can be ensured by the code of ethics and code of conduct, right? So the code of conduct for civil servants in India was established through Civil Services, Central Civil Services Conduct Rules of 1964, is prescriptive and enforceable. However, since we have the Civil Services Conduct Rules 1964, there is a need for having the code of ethics for the public administration, right? So we already have the Central Civil Services Conduct Rules 1964, but we need to have the code of ethics for the public administration, because code of ethics can ensure integrity, probity and also transparency in the administration or in the governance, and that further helps achieving the goal and the objective of minimum government and maximum governance, right? So we need to talk about the proposed model code of ethics, and this model code of ethics should include the following things, right? So the model code of ethics should first talk about the integrity of the civil servants in the public administration, right? So when we talk about integrity is one of the most important, a very essential value that is needed for all the civil servants, because integrity helps upholding the honesty among the existing civil servants, and in fact integrity also helps prevent any actions or avoid any actions that compromise the public trust. Now remember, public trust, public confidence over administration, over governance is very, very important. So that ensure participatory governance. So participatory governance is also a very important to hold civil servants and also the government accountable. So participatory governance ensures that the governance is carried in a transparent manner. Right, so therefore integrity upholds honesty and it also avoids or prevent any action that compromise the public trust. For example, so always declare personal interest to prevent conflict. Right, so there is a need to prevent conflict. So there is a concept called conflict of interest. So what is this conflict of interest? And in ethics paper this conflict of interest is very, very important. So conflict of interest means that if you are in a public position, so you should not misuse your authority, your position for your personal gain. Right, so it's not just for your personal gain, it is for your relatives, your family members, your friends. So you should not misuse your power, your authority for your personal gain, and that is conflict of interest. And if you have any conflict of interest, you must declare the personal interest, so that could prevent the conflict of interest. And secondly, the code of ethics should also talk about the accountability as well. Right, so when we talk about the accountability, it actually means accepting the responsibility for the actions and the decisions. For example, you are a civil servant and you have made a decision. So you have made a decision on your own and you are responsible for that particular decision. Right, so you're responsible for the implementation of that particular decision. So thereby you have to be answerable to the public, and in fact regularly report performance outcomes to foster transparency. So transparency and accountability are two important values within the public administration. So they make that the governance would be more responsive and also citizen centric, and that helps ensuring participatory governance. And apart from that, transparency, as I have already told you, so transparency in the administration and transparency in the way an organization works, so it should be open for the public scrutiny. Right, so whatever decisions you have taken, so those decisions must be open to the scrutiny of the larger public. You need to share information. For example, when we talk about transparency, a right to information is a very important legislation which ensures transparency in the governance. So you need to share the information, so unless it is legally restricted to share that particular information. So thereby again it helps to build public trust, public confidence, and that also helps in participatory governance as well. So impartiality is also another very important value. So every civil servant must be impartial. They must be non-biased towards the political parties, the political ideologies, and they must be impartial. They must be neutral when they are working as a civil servant. They should not discriminate among the citizens on the basis of caste, gender, race, sex, religion. So they need to ensure that all the services provided by the government reached to everyone equitably. Right, so every citizen must be treated in a fair and just manner. Otherwise it would lead to injustice among different sections if you started showing biasedness. So if you are being more and more partial to a certain section, a certain group of individuals, so that has to be avoided in the public administration. And code of ethics should strongly mention about the value of impartiality as well. And empathy sympathy, compassion are a very important values for any civil servant in the public administration, because we have a lot of poor people, we have a marginalized group of people, vulnerable group of people, and lot of people who are still discriminated. So we need to demonstrate compassion towards the vulnerable sections, right? So we should be compassionate towards the vulnerable sections, understanding their needs while formulating the policies. We need to understand, so what is the need of a particular group of people. So every civil servant must understand the needs of those group of people and try to address or redress their problems in a positive manner. And dedication to public service, so prioritize public welfare over personal gain, ensuring that all actions align with the broader social good. And this is also in line with working in line with or understanding the intent or the actual spirit of a particular law or a program or a scheme that the government has launched. So therefore, ultimately, one must be dedicated to public service, avoiding the personal interests or preventing the personal interest. So because conflict of interest should be avoided at any cost into the administration. Now, so how the suggested framework for code of ethics should look like. So the suggested framework for code of ethics should essentially focus on certain principles such as honesty, impartiality, and public interest. So these principles are very important principles, and suggested framework of code of ethics should emphasize on honesty, impartiality, and public interest. And in fact, this particular framework of code of ethics should also establish ethics bodies to regularly review and also ensure adherence to the public sector units. Ethics officers help institutionalize this process. And ultimately, in conclusion of this answer, a robust code of ethics is essential for enhancing transparency, integrity, and also accountability into the governance, right? So you just mentioned about the need to have a comprehensive and a detailed code of ethics on the lines of this code of conduct into the civil services, because that will help in promoting value driven decision making and improving public trust and also preventing corruption, thereby ensuring a more ethical, responsible public administration in India. So the next question is about Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, right? So you may have come across these Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita and Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita and also Bharatiya Sakshya Act 2023. So they were passed to replace the earlier existing Indian Penal Code, Code of Criminal Procedure, and also Indian Evidence Act. So when we talk about the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, so Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita replaced earlier existing Indian Penal Code of 1860. Now in this context, the question is, the soul of new law Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita BNS is justice, equality, and impartiality, which is based on Indian culture as well as Indian ethos, right? So justice, equality, and impartiality are based on Indian culture and Indian ethos. Okay, so discuss this in the light of major shift from doctrine of punishment to justice in the present judicial system. So this is the question, right? So discuss this in the light of a major shift from a doctrine of punishment to justice in the present judicial system. So earlier, when we have the Indian Penal Code, a Code of Criminal Procedure, so all these new laws, old laws have emphasized on punishment, but this new law, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, emphasized more on justice. So we need to talk about this in a very detailed manner. So the approach of the question, so briefly explain Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita and then write provisions of Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita in line with justice, equality, and impartiality, which is based on Indian culture and Indian ethos, and discuss potential issues with the shift and conclude the answer by mentioning relevant suggestions in the answer. Now, firstly, you need to briefly explain about Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. So, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, a new law which replaces Indian Penal Code of 1860, and it represents a significant shift in India's judicial philosophy. Right. So, what is a significant shift in India's judicial philosophy? Because the earlier existing laws have emphasized on the punishment for any crime, but the new Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita has started emphasizing on delivering justice to the victims. So, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita represents a significant shift in India's judicial philosophy, and it started emphasizing on the core values of justice, equality, and impartiality. And in fact, these three core values are rooted in Indian culture and ethos. So this is how you can briefly introduce this particular question. And then in the next part of the answer, you need to write certain provisions of Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita in line with justice, equality, impartiality based on Indian culture and ethos. Right. So how these three core values, which are rooted in Indian culture and ethos, were emphasized in the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. Now, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita emphasizes or encourages mediation and conciliation of minor or petty offences. So there are a lot of offences which can be considered as minor and petty offences. So instead of going through a long pending judicial procedure, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita emphasizes on mediation and conciliation. So if you remember, both mediation and conciliation are part of alternative dispute redressal mechanisms, right? So it can be done, and it can also result in amicably settling the existing issues between two parties. So thereby it has been reflecting India's tradition of resolving disputes through dialogue. And in fact, if you look at India's stance on Russia-Ukraine war, India's stance is that settling disputes or settling issues through dialogue and diplomacy. So that is rightly rooted in India's tradition as well as India's ethos. So for instance, offenses like petty theft may be resolved through compensation as well as reconciliation, so thereby avoiding punishment, thereby ensuring justice to the victims as well. And in fact, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita also ensures that all citizens are treated equally or equitably without any discrimination. Remember that Indian Constitution, Article 15 of the Indian Constitution, held that no person should be discriminated on the basis of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth. So therefore, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita also upholds Article 15 of the Indian Constitution, and it also ensures that all citizens are treated equally regardless of the caste, creed, the gender, aligning with the constitutional values of fundamental rights, Article 15 of the Indian Constitution. And in fact, it is obviously a welcome move, a welcome step from the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita to use a gender neutral language to ensure fairness in legal processes. So the legal provisions are not favored to any particular gender, right? So in fact, gender neutral language or gender neutral laws, in fact, a long pending demand, and in fact Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita using this gender neutral language is a welcome step. And in fact, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita also emphasized on rehabilitation over retribution. So that has been reflecting certain spiritual values of forgiveness. So in fact, Mahatma Gandhi's national movement, essentially built on the value of truth, non-violence and forgiveness. So therefore, in fact, Buddhism, Jainism have also emphasized on forgiveness. Don't you think that it is rooted in Indian culture and Indian ethos? So therefore, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita emphasized on rehabilitating offenders, particularly the young people. Example, the young offenders may receive educational programs instead of imprisonment, right? So that is very important, right? Because that helps reforming the people who are accused or who are convicted of committing such crimes. and also it provides them a chance, an opportunity live a peaceful life, a dignified life once they are released from the prisons. And in fact, proportional sentencing is inspired by dharma, and in fact the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita ensures that punishments are proportionate to the crime, so thereby balancing justice with fairness. For example, serious crimes receive severe penalties while minor offences treated leniently, and in fact dharma has rightly emphasized on this particular value of proportionate or proportional sentencing. Now, what are the issues with the particular shift from the Indian Penal Code 1860 to Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita? So there are certain issues. So if you look at those issues, there is no break from the colonial legacy, because number of crimes with punishments of rigorous imprisonment and a death penalty have increased, and there's absolutely no mention of custodial torture and accountability on police forces. And in fact, so if you look at Indian police forces, so they are unprofessional in nature, and there's a custodial torture, custodial deaths have also been taking place, and there's no mechanism which can result in increasing accountability of the police forces. So therefore certainly this is one of the shortcoming in the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. And apart from that, there are also a lot of challenges in the implementation of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita as well. Now, what are those challenges? Such as inefficient or insufficient infrastructure, and also a trained personnel for the rehabilitative justice as well. So these are certain challenges with the implementation of Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. However, there are certain suggestions as well. Now, suggestions include a comprehensive guidelines and personalization of community services. And in fact, the assignments as part of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita should be tailored to match the offender's rehabilitation needs and skills, thereby ensuring meaningful rehabilitation as well as beneficial contributions to the community by the offenders. And secondly, there should be a collaboration with the community organizations, particularly partnering with the non-governmental organizations and civil society organizations, community organizations and local authorities, so they can help effectively design, implement, supervise the community services programs for these offenders. So since it is a 150 word answer, you need to be very careful when it comes to choice of the words. So make sure that you write as many points as possible, you address all the dimensions which are given in the question, since it is a lengthy question. So the next question, and in fact this question was already asked multiple times in UPSC mains examination, and this is one of the most important program. So that was launched by the Union government, particularly for the capacity building of the civil servants. The program was known as Mission Karmayogi. Mission Karmayogi is aiming for maintaining a very high standard of conduct and behavior to ensure efficiency for serving citizens and to in turn developing oneself. Now, how will the scheme empower the civil servants in enhancing productivity and efficiency and also delivering the services at the grassroots level? Now, as I've already told you that when we talk about Mission Karmayogi, so in fact this Mission Karmayogi program was launched by the Union government way back in the year 2006 for the empowerment or capacity building of civil services. You can see here that National Program for Civil Services Capacity Building. So as part of Mission Karmayogi, there will be a shift from rules-based to roles-based human resource management, and emphasizes on the role of on-site learning in complementing off-site learning, and linking training and development of competencies of civil servants, transforming training institutions into centers of excellence, ministries to directly invest and co-create a common learning system, and also focus on massive scale training on e-learning. Now, what should be the approach? So this is how the capacity building of civil servants or civil services can be done under Mission Karma Yogi program. So if you look at the approach of this particular question, so first and foremost, you need to briefly introduce what is this Karma Yogi program, Mission Karma Yogi program, and then how empowerment of civil servants can be achieved through Mission Karma Yogi program, and then you need to discuss some challenges in the implementation of this program, and ultimately you need to conclude this answer by emphasizing on the appropriate way forward. Now, as I've already told you, that you need to briefly explain what is Mission Karma Yogi. So Mission Karma Yogi was a program for the capacity building of civil services, civil servants. It was launched way back in the year 2020, and it was designed to enhance skills of civil servants, enhance efficiency of the bureaucrats, and also make sure that they conduct is ethical, right? So for the Indian civil servant, and it also aims to create a future ready bureaucracy, ensuring efficient as well as citizen centric governance, right? So this is how you can briefly describe about the Mission Karma Yogi program. Now, how empowerment of civil servants can be done or can be achieved through Mission Karma Yogi program. So Mission Karma Yogi program ensures capacity building of civil servants through the citizen centric focus, because officials who are part of the public administration learn design thinking and empathy mapping. So design thinking and empathy mapping are very, very important when it comes to the public administration. A health department official could use these skills to redesign primary health centers based on the local community needs. Secondly, adaptive problem solving of the civil servants, right? So there should be a scenario based learning which enables officials to tackle complex issues. So whatever complex issues that they have been facing, and a municipal commissioner could better manage urban flooding by applying systems thinking, right? So this is how the capacity building of different departments and different individuals who are working at different levels could further improve the administration, right? So it enhances the efficiency of public administrators working at different positions, better service delivery for the citizens, and it results in citizen centric governance or good governance. There are a lot of problems, right? So it makes civil servants more and more innovative to address those specific challenges, to address those specific problems. For example, a municipal commissioner, right? So a municipal commissioner working in a metropolitan city, and nowadays we all knew that most of the urban centers have been facing a lot of challenges. One such challenge was a frequent floods in those urban areas, right? So under Mission Karma Yogi program, the overall focus would be on further strengthening the capacity building of those civil servants or those public servants, thereby making sure that they find out solutions, they find out innovative solutions to address the problem of this urban flooding, or take steps which could mitigate the impact of these urban floods, adapt to these floods like conditions, or adapt to climate change, right? So it would further leads to enhancing communication, because training in active listening improves the citizen interactions. So for any civil servant, citizen interactions are very, very important. You need to regularly interact with the citizens. For example, a mob protesting in front of your office, you need to interact with the mob, you need to communicate with them. So you need to convey the clear message that the government could address the problems, and a police officer could use these skills to enhance the community policing initiatives. A public servant can address the mob right? So a performance monitoring can also be done through the Mission Karmayogi program, because the annual capacity building plan ensures continuous improvement by setting yearly targets for each department as well as the official. And apart from that, the competency driven approach. So when we talk about the competency driven approach, the scheme develops 15 crore competencies. So 15 crore competencies including digital literacy as well as the problem solving as well. So for instance, a revenue officer might be trained in the GIS technology for better land record management, right? So essentially it's like a skill development, it's like a capacity building of civil servants. So we should not we don't want it to see a civil services which is not responsive, okay, which is not responsive, which is not empathetic, which is not compassionate. And in fact there's inefficiency, red tapeism into the civil services, and the civil servants prioritizing or favoring the personal interests over the larger public interests. So we don't want that kind of a civil services. Now the government has given the motto of New India. So we also have the objective of becoming a developed country, Vikasit Bharat by 2047, right? So we should also have a reoriented civil services, and that modified or a modern civil services can be achieved through this Mission Karmayogi program by capacity building of the civil servants. And it also focuses on further improving or enhancing the accountability and transparency in the administration. So specifically it focuses on behavioral training, so that would instill ethics and citizen-centric approaches among the civil servants, right? So that could ensure civil servants to become more accountable and efficient in grassroots governance. Example, e-governance initiatives improving service delivery in these rural areas. So you can also go through the 6 pillars of Mission Karmayogi, right? So these are considered as the 6 pillars of Mission Karmayogi. And ultimately you need to write a conclusion in the answer that Mission Karmayogi equips the civil servants with modern skills, modern knowledge, with the objective of capacity building of the civil servants. So thereby it ensures the effective grassroots service delivery and also fostering citizen-centric approach to governance. So that's how you can conclude this answer. And that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. If you like our work, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.